Sean,
Greetings, unmute, unmute. Greetings.
you look taller. Your hair's long. What's going on?
I don't know. It's I got hat head going on. It's very very pressed down. So you're home. Is that's Toronto?
I'm back.
When did you get back?
Last week on Wednesday, I guess.
Man, I just your Vegas New York picks became indistinguishable.
Yeah. So I've been sort of just keeping it sort of tight and quiet to see no symptoms and stuff like that. But I'm clear. And my last PCR test was when I came last week. So between the test and that little period of time, I should be good to go for normal activity now. As
Did you
far as
have a
Rob
Did you
tiring
have a
goes.
worry?
Um, I'm an insurance guy, right? So there's always a risk,
Oh
small
my
risk.
God. I'm an insurance guy. Of course, I'm worried. I'm worried all the time.
That's what people pay me for, to be worried about stuff. But yeah, so no issues on that side. Feel great. Feel great.
Awesome.
Yeah. How about you?
Health wise, pretty good. Strained a calf muscle the other day, so I hate that because now I can't jog for 2 weeks. But yeah, just
Oh, we've got
doing a whole
two
bunch of
people
stuff.
onboarding wise. By the
Say
way,
it
we've
again.
got people in the waiting room. Yeah.
Oh, good, nice. All right.
If you want to get going, it's 4 o'clock. One of them is
Yeah,
a friend of mine out of Siebel. I've known him for since 2003, and at Salesforce too.
I know we
Steve
had something
McLean.
like 10 or 11 on LinkedIn, so you never know how those convert, but we'll see.
Okay. All right. So shall we get going? Oh,
Why don't we?
oh man, we lost one. Shit.
Hmm.
Hopefully they join back. It was Javier.
Oh,
Hi, Steve.
Javier. No, he had messaged me a couple times saying he was joining us, so we'll see.
So send him a note because he was on, and then he just dropped off before I went to go get him, and I
Well,
missed him.
entertain Steve for a moment, and I will.
I will
I'll
indeed.
just send a reminder message to our signees.
Steve, how are you?
What's going on, Rob?
Not too much, man. Not too much. I missed you down in Vegas. You survived.
I did. It's easy for me to get there, right?
Yeah. I
Very
had to
close.
take a plane and all that stuff.
Well, I still got to take a plane. I don't live down there. Yuck.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, I came in from New York on that trip, so it was the probably the most sedate flight into Vegas that I've ever had. Normally, the flights it starts being Vegas on the flight there. The ones leaving Vegas are better because they're quieter.
yeah, I mean, I feel like an old snob, but it's only an hour on Southwest.
Right.
But I often feel like I'm on a plane full of idiots when I go in and out of Las Vegas. Yeah. It's
Well,
like
yeah,
every
because Southwest.
it's like everybody has to prove their frat boy cred, right, to be
Yeah.
on the plane.
The first time I jumped on a flight to Southwest, I was going west from Chicago. So I was just in a rush. And the best way to me to get where I was going was to take a Southwest airline. So I'm all insurance stuff. I got a tie on, and I think I'm going on an airline, but no one briefed me about the
Yeah.
no seating assignment thing. And then I'm the guy standing up when they call the plane and not rushing into line, going like, "What is going on? And who am I traveling with?" So,
Yeah.
but I survived.
It's fine. I mean, I'm where I live. It's what's easy on a lot of this stuff.
Sure. Oh yeah, I get it. I get that. So thanks for coming out. I know I did that invite, and you must be curious about what the Gray Swan Guild is.
I
Otherwise, you
am.
wouldn't be here, and that's great. I'm joined by a co-founder, Sean Moffat. This is Steve McLean. Hi,
Hey,
Michael,
Steve, how are you?
How we
Looks like
doing?
Michael has joined as well.
and he's
Oh,
on mute.
he's
He's
muted.
on mute.
He's got
Oh,
perfect
there
salt
you
and pepper hair, but muted.
go. That's right. How are you?
All right.
Is
Well,
it is it Rob?
in the hair category, I think you're doing better than all of us, either based on volume or coifness. So,
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know. At least I have hair, right? That's what I say. So it's all great.
This is how long Steve and I have known each other.
Yeah,
I remember.
We had hair.
We had hair.
We had hair. I still go by a mirror and I'm like, who's that guy? It's like, oh.
I love it.
Yeah. So people used to say that I look like my dad. Now they say I look older than my dad looked. So that, earned. All these gray hairs, gentlemen, all earned. Sean, I don't know what's going on with you, but all earned.
I'm trying to still have Matt Damon be my doppelganger in as many movies as possible, and I'm slowly losing that ability as I age. So, but he's aging too, I guess. So, yeah.
He's got a new one coming out, The Duel, right? The Last Duel.
I think so, yeah. And another Michael. So this will become confusing. We'll establish nicknames by the end of the session.
Who's going to be Michael and who's going to be Mike?
And I think Michael Linton. I think you're muted. So.
Well,
Yeah,
my
Michael, dibs on Michael, so.
If you just all call yourself Mike for the next hour, we'll be fine.
So the problem isn't with the other Michael; it's with the guys with the weird names.
Well, it's not a weird name. How are you?
I have an online poker crew, and it's so diverse. There's a whole bunch of Seans, Ians, and Scotts, and I am known as the evil Sean, and there's like a good Sean, which I don't know if that's a personality characterization or how good my poker play is. I have no idea. I know. Should we have a veneer of professionalism here, Rob? Like we had like 10 or 11 people sign up for this month's session. We do these
as long
once
as
a
it's
month.
just like 2 layers of shellac.
Okay, we can do that, right?
Just 2 layers of shellac, just shiny enough to look professional.
Nice. Well, we have something fascinating to go through, but I guess before we do, we'd love to hear who you guys are, and we may be joined by others, but just it's always good to get a sense of where people are coming in from, who they are, and what makes them tick. So any Michael in the room want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So Michael Hill, I actually, I keep saying recently. It's not so recent anymore. It's actually been 2 years now. So that's, I guess, not so recent. But right about COVID time, I retired. So I was at Medtronic, so medical device company, largest medical device company. Started there as a scientist. I was there 27 years. And the last 3 years, I was in corporate. Basically, it's called the Vice President of Science, Technology, and Innovation. It's the acting CTO of Medtronic. We have a chief medical officer. We don't really have a chief technology officer per se. But the Vice President of Science and Technology reports to the Chief Medical Officer in corporate. And that role is always a long-term technical person at the company. And so I am a serial large company entrepreneur, if you will. I've actually been very fortunate to bring several great healthcare innovations, therapies that I helped actually create over long periods of time, actually, and see them go to market. And I have done both research, development, clinical, regulatory work. So I've done all of those different areas to actually bring something to market. So from a healthcare standpoint, I have actually functionally done all the different things it takes to get something to market. In a large corporation where you have unlimited resources at your fingertips and lots of bureaucracy. So I found out how to operate through that pretty effectively. So it's been fun. I mean, it's very self-gratifying to know that there's things that I worked on and helped invent. I've got like 60 or 70 patents, and most of them are worthless. 2 of them are worth about $5 billion each. And I got $500 for all of them, the worthless ones and the important ones. And so, it's nice to know that something I've invented, if you will, is actually helping hundreds of thousands of patients every year. One of them is actually extending life, and the other one is actually improving their life. And so it's an amazing kind of affirmation from that. So I did retire early, and I thought that I would try to do some different things. I'm all about knowledge sharing. And so I love this whole concept of kind of what this represents as well, is it's, the knowledge sharing. I have worked with so many small companies and even big companies, and such poor decision-making is often because they don't have the right timely information to make the decision, or they don't know who to ask to get the information to make the timely decision. And so I've basically been spending the last 18 months connecting people, helping people make better decisions, use critical thinking and some other skills that I think that are important to be able to make better decisions as well. And I've worked with my academic institutions as well as small institutions. I went to Duke University and Case Western, and so I sit on different boards there, and I'm working with different things there. And I really enjoy the whole human technology co-evolution of things. So I'll just tell one quick story. I know this is a little longer than you guys probably expected, but it is a cool story. 5 weeks ago or so, I was in Miami working with a co-team from UCLA and Case Western that is in the X Prize Avatar semifinals. And so they were actually competing, and we'll find out at the end of October, beginning of November, if they get to go into the finals, which will be in January. But it's really a cool thing. I mean, you literally have an operator in one room. You stand there with the glasses on here, and you've got sensors they're stimulating your fingers and things like that. So you feel things in your hand. And then on the other side, you have a robot that's interacting with a recipient person and in another room or another location. And basically you could toast glasses, you could move puzzle pieces, you shook hands, you did all these things. And it truly was an avatar human experience. And it was great. It was very fun. And so we're working with, of course, the engineers and the computer science guys, but we also have an anthropologist, we have a phenomenologist, we have other people who are interested and involved in this, because it is the human technology coevolution that's really interesting to see how we move forward. So things that I'm interested in and things I'm having fun with.
Hey, that wasn't enough, Michael. You've got to give us more. This kind of lightweight stuff. The Gray Swan Guild has standards. Go ahead, Sean.
And coming in from San Diego?
Well, so I actually live and work between three places. I actually am currently in Fort Lauderdale, but I actually move between, if you will, San Diego, Fort Lauderdale, and Barcelona. So on Monday, I fly to Barcelona. And so I kind of work in Europe some, I work in the US, and of course, San Diego is a great place to, but as I say, I lived in Minneapolis for 27 years. I did play adult ice hockey for 27 years as well. But it's nice to be able to move away from winter and snow, and I'm not sad about it at all. So I'm pretty happy about that. So San Diego, Pacific Coast, Fort Lauderdale, Atlantic Coast, and Barcelona, Mediterranean Coast. And they're all pretty warm weather places, so it's okay.
All right. Before we go on to Michael, I have a good dad joke. What is Starbucks' favorite city? Fort Lauderdale. I've been needing to use that someplace.
What's good about that? What is good about that?
It is like almost worse than a dad joke because it tries to be funny and it isn't, right? So, Mr. Linton, I presume.
Mr. Linton, maybe. I just got to ask, Michael, your extremities sensors. I had a dream once about engaging as a condor or an eagle with my wingtips, figures, getting the feedback so that I could fly in the canyon, Are you guys at that level yet? I don't keep up with it, so I don't know.
Well, it's, the haptics are pretty incredible. It's beyond the vibration. It's beyond vibration.
Yeah.
So you actually, the way that the group that we're working with is working on it, because they've done a lot of functional electrical stimulation. They're probably the preeminent. Case Western has done probably the most on functional electrical stimulation for restoration of, people who have had spinal cord injuries. Mm-hmm. And so restoring their ability to move their arms and legs. And so they basically do stimulate. So you feel your finger tighten up as you start to hold something, like you're holding something, and it starts to tighten up. Mm-hmm. So there's different ways of doing it. There's an exoskeleton that one of the other teams used that basically, as you started to squeeze down like this, the exoskeleton would tighten up so that it was harder for you to actually tighten your hand. Yeah. But haptics, I think, will play a big role in how we sense. It's interesting. I think, I tell the team that over the last 35 years, we have made a difference in cardiovascular disease, right? I mean, people don't die of heart attacks anymore, right? I mean, at least not in the developed world. And so I think we're embarking on that now for the neurological and mental health areas, because we're both sensing and pacing in the neurological space. And I think we're going to make a lot of headway in the next 35 years in that space.
Yeah. Lovely. So if I just go from the sublime to the ridiculous, the name Michael, Michael, he who is like God. It's a very useful thing to remember. My career has been very different from Michael's. I basically, I did an MBA in 1970 out of engineering, physics, and the desire to be rich and famous in something. Didn't care what, as long as it included rich and whatever, But before I did the MBA, I was in Vancouver in the late 60s. And anybody who was in Vancouver in the late 60s knows that things changed. So that it changed my attitude to the NBA, it changed my attitude to a lot of things. But by the mid 70s in London, I'd given up on society as a physical possibility within the thermodynamic limits. Global warming was a done deal for me by the early 70s. I saw where we were going out of my experience in Vancouver in the late 60s. And I thought, well, that's toast. We're out. It's all over. How do you do it gracefully was my attitude. But then about 10 years, 15 years later, in 1982, the small town I'm living in Western Canada experienced, like everybody else did, Reaganomics, Thatcherism, tight money, low money, no money in town. So out of that situation, we created a virtual bank with 8-inch floppy disks holding 64K. And our primary communication medium was Radiotech phone answering machine with a mini tape in it, to which people could say, this is Michael, not that Michael, this is this Michael, and I'm paying $42 to Jim. And that was on the tape. And that then went in the database, and that was it. From the database, you run it. We were operating at 25 cents a transaction, full monthly recording, processing, mailing statements, and the whole damn thing. That was a thing called the LET system, L-E-T-S system, which we had to camel case because we couldn't do it in one case without, so trademarking, right? So tried to trademark a free money open source communications package in the early 80s, which we're still doing. It's now called Open Money, and it's fully dimensional and enables any participant to create a money on the fly. Now, not a coin, not a Bitcoin. We're not doing any that. We got crypto, but it's in the authentication layers, because all we're doing is the enclosed network of reciprocity. Because an enclosed network of reciprocity makes its own rules, lives by it, or stops. So
how big does it intend to become, or was it, or is it, or I don't know what the right language to use, but.
Well, we'd say probably our line is anybody who uses money and could use some more.
It's a good line.
Yeah, because you know the stuff we've usually got, it's not my money even when it's in my wallet. It's their money that's in my wallet, because when I spend it, it's not there anymore and it's not coming back. On the other hand, if you were issuing money in a network, reciprocity amongst maybe 1,000 businesses, 100 people, whatever, you either keep your promise, in which case you're valid, or you don't, in which case you're not. And that's the basis of a concept called mutual commitment, which is promise theory in monetary models, and is basically scalable, we believe, to something like 40% of GDP.
Very cool. We're gonna have to poke into that later. Like we just came out of we did a session this weekend within the guild on crypto this weekend, and little did I know, but Henry Ford tried to set up his own currency about 100 years ago based on energy. He had a different constraint at the time.
The technocracy dudes, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Henry had
perhaps less noble than your ambition, but I found it interesting nonetheless that one of the.
I assure you, it's not ambition and it's not noble.
Well, no, I was going to say
it's Scottish and it's reality. I don't have an ambition here. I'm just sort of noticing what I see and publishing. So money that goes around works better at conceiving of community relationship pattern than money that goes through. We've been colonized by a bank tokenization, whereby the value of our relationships, productivity, interchange, etc., is subsumed to an external measure of account. Our score in their casino.
I think you will find a good ally in Rob Tyree here, because he went a little bit negative this weekend when somebody asked him what he thought the prospects for crypto was. He went crazy town. So yeah.
Good, very wise. The world is not that flat. It's just not quite that flat. They will fall off the edge.
I
So
do
we've
like a
got
good phenomenon.
somebody here that has saved medically hundreds of thousands of people in the world. There, we've got somebody here that's trying to change the monetary impact of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in the world. Steve,
8 billion is the number.
8 billion. Well,
Just
I
8
thought you
billion.
said
That'll
40%.
be all of us.
Oh no!
Oh, wait a minute. I thought
it's
40%
scaling.
of GDP. I didn't know how
Yeah,
you
it's
were
scaling.
colonizing
Yeah,
it.
but everybody,
Okay.
nobody doesn't want money that comes back. Give it a thought.
I'm gonna be left with the message of everybody wants more money. That's a great.
No, that's not what we said.
No.
The right statement is.
See, the recovering marketer in me interpreted your message.
It is a loyalty loop. You see, it's not about having more money, but having money that does more.
Gotcha.
It's a qualitative distinction which creates a quantitative behavior and a patterning behavior. It's basically thermodynamics reaches economics.
It's about time.
I'll help create the
Indeed, sir.
campaign.
It's
It'll
all
be
about
Samuel
time.
L. Jackson saying, "What's in your looping wallet?" Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It's all about time.
All right. Speaking of time, let's keep going. Steve, jump into the pile here.
Yeah, you're gonna let me go after a couple of slackers here. I mean,
They've been satisficing their entire life. Yeah.
I'll do my best. Yeah. So I've been screwing around with the world of insurance for decades, right? And I've never sold it. I don't really like companies that do. And I got into it like most people who touch the insurance industry is by like random accident. And I describe that industry as one of those bug lights, that mosquitoes fly around, and like this, let's say they're even cognizant mosquitoes, and they know if they touch that thing, they're going to get zapped. But you fly around and you see AIG and you're like, no way I'm going to that place. And then you're like, oh, but they're offering me a lot of money, and wham, you're in. And then you get out again. That's kind of been an example of my career. But yeah, I went to school in Berkeley, and after that, I grew up in Napa with winemakers and whatnot. And while I was at Cal, I got recruited by Gallo, and I worked for them for about a year while I was in and out of Cal, and just went, no way, right? I'm not just going to jump into this again. So I stepped off the earth and I skied, and I worked for Club Med for 3 years. And at the end of that glorious time, I got banged up, and there was a big earthquake in Northern California. And I grew up again in Northern California, and also a small town in Quebec. So I'm kind of Canadian, but I'm an American citizen. After this big earthquake, they needed anybody with a pulse in the body to try to sort out claims. So that was my introduction to the glorious and sexy world of insurance. And over time, I went to grad school on an AIG program, kind of AIG and kind of CIA, lots of acronyms there. But I ultimately, obviously, ended up in insurance because at that point in time, the wall came down, and they didn't need white guys who spoke French. They needed different dudes who spoke Arabic and Korean. So I did a lot of very different things in insurance, mainly because I'm just kind of one of those curious bastards that doesn't give up. And I underwrote weird stuff overseas, big global things, but it was a tremendous learning experience. And I was very happy doing it. I was working out in Asia when the Asian currency crisis hit, and I was what's called a London underwriter, but I didn't work for Lloyd's. I worked for a division of AIG called Lexington. And when that currency crisis hit, simultaneously, more or less, was a dot-com boom. And I quit working for insurance companies and started working for companies that create tech for insurance companies. And that's where I met Rob. Rob was gracious enough. When he was on the way out of Salesforce, he kind of introduced me to be in Salesforce. So I worked a lot of big companies like Siebel Systems, and I met Rob there actually the first time, and Salesforce and Microsoft and MicroStrategy, all trying to help teach them how to sell crap to insurers, with the goal being that there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a better way. To me, it's a very suboptimal industry, especially how it operates in the United States for consumers. It's ridiculous what they do. And I've walked away a number of times, but kind of pulled up and said, I'm going to do it one more time, because the stuff that Rob and I did back in the day, and I know he's long out of that, was around how insurance companies interface with people like you and me, which is not great. And I think all that's kind of been done. So I agreed to go with an Israeli company that's kind of trying to do something the next level down. So that's, it's an industry and a spot that actually can be quite interesting if you look at it holistically, and it is very necessary. An example would be we're talking about sort of these esoteric pie in the sky conversations, and I often find myself being, the hairless, grumpy guy in the back of the room that kind of shakes their head. And I hear, for example, I'm kind of around Silicon Valley, everybody talking about driverless cars, right? And driverless trucks. And yes, I live in the West Coast, and of course, driving between, let's say Reno and Chicago, Reno and like Kansas City is prime for autonomous trucks. And I always just sit back and say, all you idiots, who pays for it when a truck nails a school bus load full of kids and the thing goes up in flames? And that is the reason why we're not going to have them anytime soon until we figure that out. Before you guys got on, I'm almost done here and I'll shut up. But before you got on, Rob said, hey, I saw you at this insurance trade show. That was a couple weeks ago in Vegas. And while I was there, because people don't know what to make of this kind of Israeli company I work for, it's got a weird title and we can't really describe what we do. A lot of people would walk up and talk to me, and this guy, and you guys may not know this terminology, but this company walks up to me and says, we're an MGA for autonomous vehicles. Which, yeah, I mean, that's like an insider joke, but an MGA is somebody that like collects risks and then hands them over to an insurance company. And nobody's stepping up to take the liability in the United States for autonomous vehicles. And because of that, you're just not going to see them other than cruising around Palo Alto and doing, various, bits and pieces here. It's a suboptimal thing, and probably in France or some other place with the legal system, they'll figure it out. Here they won't. So, I mean, I'll sort of stop there. But yeah, I'm kind of an insurance nerd who works for tech companies. But I have a habit of sort of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, even though I've kind of given up on trying to actually change anything. And in my spare time, I teach kids how to ski race.
I love it. While there's still snow in California, or is that in Quebec?
Oh, dude, we got, like, where I live, we got 4 feet coming in the next 5 days.
Oh, well.
It's finally getting some precipitation.
What would be the closest town?
I live, Sacramento is like 100 kilometers to the west of me, and then Tahoe is like the equidistant to the east.
Very cool. All right, so you'll still have water.
Well, we don't right now, but if we get 4 feet, things will stop smoking just above us because it's still smoking. And
yeah, I love it.
We'll be on our way.
I've just transitioned into sweater weather up here in Toronto, so it sounds like we're having a shared experience. So, Rob, you want to step into the void for people that don't know you?
It's amazing pattern match with Steve. We keep crossing paths no matter. Let's just keep doing that, Steve. That's what's going to happen, whether it's on a ski hill or insurance conference, or we'll be stepping into the same autonomous car, deciding a rock, paper, scissors on who's paying for the liability on this ride.
Exactly.
It's just self-insured. Let's just go. Serial entrepreneur, multiple startups, last 20 years in insurance like Steve, big companies, little companies. I love the world. Got some reverb going on here. I don't know what's going on with the magic.
Yeah, we're good.
So what I've been doing of late, just came out of an Israeli-backed startup in the insurance industry. We built the largest P&C marketplace in the US. Is something I always wanted to do and never thought could be done, and we did it. A little tiny slice in a very overall small marketplace, but we actually were able to do things that I spent a decade promising that you could do with technology. We just did it and sold it in quite a different way. It really opened my eyes of how to be in business to get things done. And leading with software is not the way to get things done in business. That causes all sorts of strange aberrations. So right now I'm running my own company. It's an advisory company. I've got 8 companies in my cohort. They vary from very boring insurance tech companies because I'm good at it. And I help them go to market and do product marketing for them and hopefully grow faster than they would ever otherwise imagine. But I've got a couple other players. One is a sport tech company that is building a short video coaching platform for parents, kids, and coaches to open up access to high-end coaching to kids who can't get access to good coaching for their mental health. I've got another one that's an overlap with you, Michael Hill. It's an art gallery in the metaverse. And we would love to have people with much better exposure inside the metaverse, but they're on a little tiny startup and they want to grow up into being an art gallery experience, the future of that part of the metaverse that has to be solved. And then I'm also a co-founder of the Gray Swan Guild. Among other things, I like to run around. I like to fish. I like to run. I've got an old Jeep that drives up hills in strange ways, and I think it's one of the most funny, unusual design objects I've ever owned.
Pretty good. I haven't heard that summation before, and I've heard about it 20 times. It always comes out differently. I like it.
I try and do a new one for you all the time, Sean.
Yeah, no. I can see who the audience is.
If you can always end with an unusual design object, that's
Who's not myself.
No, be what you choose to speak of. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm all full of design all over the place. The design everywhere in my life.
Yeah.
Is that one of those things where we're not supposed to notice the Coke can as it drifted past the screen? Like you were so.
Nor the picture of Red Bull.
Where is it? I didn't see the gorilla. Did you see the gorilla? I didn't see it. I'll be quick on this. We probably have you guys have taken the pressure off of this. Sometimes we're like crawling out of whatever the last meeting we've been in, and it's like, who's updated the deck or who? And like, you guys could have we could have wound you guys up and we could have gone the hour. My name's Sean Moffat. I'm based out of Toronto. I am a recovering corporate innovator / CMO / whatever. I've done a lot of bad things to the planet. I've done a lot of bad things in business. And so I'm now, the Guild is somewhat my payment back to the world in terms of trying to hopefully favorably impact the world by producing, better intelligence and kind of having a great impact. I've hung out with Canada's largest incubator, Mars. So I spent about 3 or 4 years there providing some executive counsel. I've done 4 startups, and myself and Rob started this audacious thing called the Gray Swan Guild, where it kind of started with the pandemic. We wrote a couple of posts and people kind of glommed onto them. And I think, Rob, you were right there at the start, and it's like, what do we do about this? And so we got 40 people together. 40 people became 300 people, 300 people became 600 people, 600 people became 2,000 people. And I think the commonality that I've heard from all of you today is just an intellectual curiosity about things, and hopefully a need, a fervent kind of want to actually impact the world in a little bit better than when we left it. So I'm whether it's your Godfather type of rendition, Steve, where it's just when you thought the insurance game was going to bring you back out again, whether it's society building Michael Linton and your new wallet, or whether it's becoming the new bionic man, hopefully at less than $6 million, Michael. It's you guys, I think, fit the bill. We'll give you the option. Let's try the option, Rob, and it'll test our mettle here in terms of remembering things. Do you want us to walk through the deck, or do you want to just have faces on screen and we'll use our English language mouths to explain what we actually do and where our aspirations are and where you might fit in? Which one?
Quickest, fastest.
Well, if you know the content, just talk, right?
Yeah. And I'm a people person, so faces are better than slides.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, you want to try it?
Yeah, sure.
We'll do the tennis match back and forth. I don't know if you remember we don't even have to go in the order of the deck. This will be good improv for us.
Oh, yes. My favorite form of art these days.
All right. I'll do the first 20 seconds. You do the next. And then hopefully we finish in about 10 minutes and we'll cover it off the full landscape. Our mission at the Guild is to make sense of the world's biggest challenges and next gray swans. And gray swan is a term. It's an economic term. Whereas you've probably heard of Nassim Taleb's Black Swan. This is improbable events, but ones that can be considered, validated, mused about, and kind of forecasted ahead of time. I would view the pandemic almost as being a gray swan, not a black swan. It wasn't like a meteor that came out of nowhere, but it was a implausible thing that actually happened and created much discomfort in the world. Rob, your turn.
We always want to be new at the Race One Guild and novel. So it was an organization started to be not an organization. It is virtual in nature. It is decentralized in nature by design. Some people don't realize design, but it is specifically designed to hang together with a set of energies, a set of attractors, to get a certain set of people together that started in Canada but is global in aspiration. We are spread across the world now. We are trying to keep growing across the world with new ideas, new structures, new microstructures to gather together to solve common problems early in the life cycle of those problems. So we have this undercurrent of sense making, which is, there's, as Sean puts it, big tent and little tent sense making. We are big tent. We accept all sorts of forms of early inspection and analysis into problems, into challenges in the universe, and come together in different ways to solve them. And this is one of the different ways that we do is where we end with a result. So I call it a virtual think tank, but Sean almost always calls it
is that
a
me?
do tank.
Sorry, I missed my snare
Your
drum
cue.
there. Yeah.
A do tank. And the do tank means that when we start one of these microstructures, we end up with something that's tangible and exists in digital format that can be copied forever.
Over to me. Principally, and you touched on some of them, Rob, there's 6 things the Guild does, because I think at some point people go, wow, that's an interesting group of people. Like, what do you actually do? Is this some secret Kiwanis club, or what's the other one with the fezzes? Or is that Kiwanis?
Shriners.
There you go. Shriners.
And then there's the
You're all former Masons though, but
and there's the Masons, right? I was thinking about the Masons too. So there's a really good article that one of the wikis had done on the rebirth of guilds, which if you get a chance, have a look at it, because I think the parallels of what we're trying to do and trying to learn together and build our craft and get better at seeing the future and bringing it forward to the now has some really interesting parallels to the medieval guilds. But 6 things we do. We do things through events and experiences. So we have about 60 events planned over the next 6 months. This, I guess, would be in a very cottage type of sense. One of ours, we have feature cities of the month. This month it's Boston. So we're bringing groups of people from Boston in. We've got one major event a quarter, which we'll talk about soon. We got clubhouses on Fridays and Sundays. Not too sure if we're sold on the medium, but it's a great way to democratize what we've learned. So that's one thing. We do events and experiences. We do new intelligence and foresights. We have some primary research. We've got this exciting new group that's minting how we almost do a better pedagogy of sense making and futures thinking, because it seems to be quite tribal. And we have these monthly events called ateliers, which is a fancy French word for workshop. And we just collide on a topic and bring people together. And the last thing on the first half is we produce content. So we produce monthly reports. Rob is principally the instrumental guy behind our news wrap that, given one planning meeting, we've had 40 weekly articles that have really shaped our thinking about making sense of the week that was. And we have some essay perspectives as well. You want to chime in on other stuff we do, Rob?
Sure. We do, so in this creation, they've got this pattern that works, and that if there's a good idea that one person has that can be crossed over to 2 other people, to 3 people as a core, that idea, if designed appropriately, can grow to maybe 9 people working together to get something done that produces a result. The wrap that I designed was that method of something in the center that was really meant to be a bit of a trick, to not be one thing, but many things. So that was one type of construct we did. When we started, the very first result of the guild was a publication. So we gathered together a set of writers. We called it a wave, and we had about 60 essayists write short points of view about the pandemic. And then our team wrapped that together, and you can find that first wave report. It looks like an analyst report that you would buy from McKinsey or another consultancy that's even better than theirs, called the Grace One Guild. We did that format. Another kind of event we did was called the Day of the Swan, and that was another idea that was born out of a set of meetings, and we were riffing on what to do, and we wanted to do an event. So what we came up with was 24 hours of the Swan, the Day of the Swan, and it was an unconference We centered it around one theme of sense making, and we gathered together people that want to speak about it from a technical perspective, a sociological perspective. We had an emergency room doctor who was also a neuroscientist who experienced COVID live in Florida and wrote a book about it, and she was a centerpiece in the middle of it. And we ran that across 24 hours, and we ended up meeting with our friends in our Australian chapter, where Sean and I were at midnight, they were noon at lunch, and that's just amazing to see as it is. Day of the Swan turned into a video production. So when we were talking about these endpoints that happened, that ended up being all recorded. And then we structured it in such a way that we could reuse elements of that. And so we're using those ideas of live events with an end result to produce the next set of events. So those are two good examples of events that we've done and publications that come from them. Sean?
And I guess just in keeping with that, and then we'll open it up for questions, I guess, because you probably will have some. I guess from a governance standpoint, we are an Inc., a not-for-profit Inc. We've had wars almost spent earlier this year in terms of strategically where we would go and how we would incorporate and stuff. We've got through a lot of those governance things and are lightly governed by something we call guardrails. There's about 12 of them. But really, we're driven by some values. We're driven by the notion of experimentation and community and learning and hopefully creating some good impact for the world. Other things that we're doing that will excite you. I promise you, we will hit you somewhere in your synapses that they start firing off now. November 10th and 11th of this year, we are doing 20 hours of programming. So this may be our future fall linchpin event. It's called 1,000-Day Radar. Hopefully at the end of this session, I can flip you some stuff, and you guys might even want to consider being panelists given all of your esteemed backgrounds. But we've taken 20 topics. We're going to do it from 12 to 10 o'clock Eastern time one day, and then 12 to 10 the next day, and produce in an agile fashion 14-page reports that do a 3-year perspective on the future. We have something scheduled for February for all of you. I guess, Steve, you're technically an American, so you guys probably love March Madness. We're going to do our own version of March Madness and do Battle of the Sense-Making Cities and pit the smartest people from 8 different cities in our guild off on each other. And it'll be almost like BBC World Debates meets what we do. And at the end of the day, we'll anoint the smartest guild city based on some level of friendly competition. We're starting to profile our members. We have this great thing called 8 Questions With, where we ask some of our members what makes them tick and who they would have over for a sense-making supper and a whole bunch of things, which is starting to get traction. We do a whole bunch of different things. I know one thing I'm leading up right now is a group of 25 of us is a guild within a guild right now, where we've just stumbled on 7 projects that we're going to work on almost like ventures. And so one of the big ones is, how do we do sense-making corporate sprints? How do we do an online masterclass series? And how do we produce a book that pulls together all of our best practices, tools, and approaches? And partly it's selfish for the guild to keep the lights on, partly it's selfish for us in terms of reputation, and partly it's hopefully altruistic in terms of creating some positive impact and some better sense making for the world. Rob, what have we missed?
Just not much, Sean. You got things covered. On the business side of things, when we initiated the guild, there was a set of us that were firm believers that this was a not-for-profit, holistic exercise, everything published to Creative Commons. And that was a good way of starting to getting us to this sort of level of 2,000 people operating in some kind of unison from time to time. This year, going to 2022, the incorporation means that some of the things that we do will be produced with revenue in mind. Our first level of revenue, we believe, will come from sponsorships from different brands into some of the publications and events that we're doing, or some things that we do in custom for them. The idea to generate these funds are to grow the guild. It's not for any of the founders or the board to become rich, but in order to have some level of revenue so that we could do something like maybe a face-to-face event, or some specialized gear or specialized data. I know that Sean and some of the members of the sense-making crew are very keen on training the next generation of sense makers. So that budget to hire interns to teach them how to do this kind of thing and grow what we do as assets is also earmarked for some of these funds. So more formal business operations for the guild coming in 22, certainly very important. Sean, why don't we close off the general stuff with just our key values, and then we'll open up the questions.
Yeah, you know what? We gave them short shrift. And you know what we didn't do either? Every single meeting, we usually start off with good news. And we kind of, I'm going to interpret Michael Hill's soliloquy about how great he's done stuff for the world as maybe qualifies for that, but it feels disingenuous. But
Good news for me today. I met Michael. Michaels. You too.
So yeah, in terms of values, my hope is we can kind of imbue everybody with kind of these at least 4 words. We're collaborative. So we're committed to the collective good. We've rarely had to enforce this one. I think, Rob, we probably, dead to rights, had some selfish people in the early days of the guild that were like, how do we turn this smart group of people into Mark Zuckerbergian like revenue? And so we kind of put a kibosh to those people. But generally, people that join us are collaborative to a bone. And it's true. Like, you produce better results when multiple minds come together on the same problem. We're purposeful. We like to emphasize evidence-based. We're not strictly hamstrung by it, but hopefully with the notion of helping business, policy, and humanity. We're intellectually curious, which, God, all 3 of you guys have in spades. Like, if we had a quotient value, I'm sure you would all fit into the top quintile. We're rational. We're optimistic. We're aware, but not denying our sense-making ability to be self-aware, hopefully. And then we're aspirational. You know what? Rob mentioned the day of the Swan. We did 24 hours of activity with about 4 weeks notice. And the event was amazing. It was global. And there's a lot of people saying, maybe we should like bring it back to about 8 hours. And I think by force of leadership of Rob and a whole bunch of other people behind the scenes, we're able to do some pretty cool stuff. And we're going to do some pretty cool stuff in the future, hopefully with all of you guys as well. We should shut up and actually listen to you. Like, questions, guys?
Maybe I'll just start with something.
Yeah.
You know, I actually, when I first got the information about it, you know, the collaboration, the purposeful, the intellectually curious, and the aspirational. I mean, those are actually things that do resonate with me. I mean, the 3 words that I use for myself, I mean, we did this HR exercise years ago, but it was curiosity, passion, and perseverance. And so, you know, from my standpoint, being able to be purposeful, because Medtronic probably had, it and J&J, at least in the healthcare business, has one of the oldest missions in business. I mean, our mission is 75 years old. And so, you know, we were very mission driven with putting patients first and using technology to help patients live better lives, right? And so it's, you know, I think the purposeful is really important. So it resonated with me. One of the things that my early retirement gave me was the opportunity to say, I get to now work with groups of people that share my values and ethics. And so it's something that you get to choose. And I literally have gotten up from a table in, unfortunately, guys, Palo Alto. And I actually got up from the table, paid for my dinner, and said, you know, I'm excusing myself. This is not going to work. And it's because of not sharing the values of where I thought that things needed to go. And I have actually, even in my corporate job, gotten up from the table of a prestigious university in the United States, one of the top universities in the world, probably. And, you know, they were basically, all they could talk about was how much money they were going to make, as opposed to educating our future and preparing for our future. And I did the same thing. I told them, thank you very much, but I was going to take my ideas and thoughts elsewhere. And so that is one thing that I actually think is extremely important. I like storytelling, so you get a little story. I sat next to the CEO of Johnson & Johnson. He had been at Johnson & Johnson for 42 years. He started as a sales guy. In the last 12 years, he was CEO. And I asked Bill, he said, you know, why one company? I'm going to be a one company person too, but not 42 years, but at one company. And he said, Michael, that's simple. He said, if your values and the company values are aligned and your immediate boss supports you, why do you want anything else? He said, but the corollary of that is also true. If your values and the company values begin to diverge, or for those mathematically inclined, it's not an and, it's an or your immediate boss does not support you, if you're not looking for a job in 6 months, you're wasting your time. So, you know, pretty clever thoughts. So I get to work with fun people like you guys now. So I get to choose.
It is an interesting piece, though. I'm going to put us in a similar age strata, all of us. That may be horrible for some of you that are younger, whoever the youngest of the group is. But you do come to a point in your career where it's just like, man, this, I don't care how much bread you're putting in front of me. Like there's got to be more, right? So I think in part, you I think myself and Rob have some interesting business lives that are still value driven, but in part the guild is very much a bit of a response to that, right, Rob? Like just
absolutely.
And so I did have a question. I wrote my question down and didn't ask it. The question is, one of my things that I did as at Medtronic was, we said you cannot predict the future. I don't think we can predict the future, right? I think if I could, I would go out to Las Vegas and I'd have a big South Pacific island somewhere that nobody was allowed on. But you cannot predict the future. And so the best way to predict the future is to prepare for it. And you prepare for it. I mean, you went to school, I had my PhD. I've also got my MBA. You prepare for the future by looking and doing things so that you can accommodate most of the things that are going to occur in the future. Not everything, but some things. And so that whole philosophy of preparing appropriately, not thinking that you can necessarily predict. I like the sense making. All the words that you use are very Canadian-like friendly, I guess. I'll put it that way, right? I mean, it's like it makes sense, and it resonates really well. So, from my standpoint, that piece is extremely important in how we look at it. So, from my standpoint, philosophically, I guess, what is your philosophical perspective on? We can't predict the future. We can only prepare for it. The best way to prepare for it is to help create it, right? That's what I always tell my team, and I like ambiguity. I mean, I love ambiguity. I'm very comfortable having all kinds of, lots of ambiguity. And most people just drive them nuts. They want everything very, boxed in. And so what philosophically came up? Why did you guys decide this? I mean, from a philosophical standpoint. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to go first,
Sure.
Rob?
So on the advent of one of the most unusual economic, social, political, technological, medical events in my lifetime, in my experience in being a student of history, nothing like this had occurred before the pandemic. When it got announced by the WHO, I'd been watching it since the case counts and the death counts were in the ones in January, because anytime I hear something, because I'm a computer scientist and statistician by training, anything that's novel and new and affects the human genome, I pay attention to. Anything novel and exponential, I pay attention to, whether it's pet rocks or diseases. I'm just built that way. And this one is nightmare scenario back then and stayed that way January, February, March, April, May, and so on. So in March, I was seeking, and in the companies I was advising, I didn't have enough tools in front of me to seek to set strategy for these companies, given what was going on. So when Sean and Andrea wrote their essay, it was the first time I could actually look at something and look a broad look at it. And when we were discussing what happened and why we were together, it was Andrea, one of the co-founders, who had said, well, this is what we're doing here isn't analysis. We're not doing strategy. We're not doing scenarios. We're doing sense making. And I said, what's that? And then we drilled into it. And now in both the formal side of sense making, and this is mostly out of an ex-IBMer named David Snowden, who's quite genius. And I thought trivial at the beginning of this, but he really has a set. Don't say that to him.
Oh, he'd love it. He'd love it. He'd take you apart.
I thought it was trivial, but then all of a sudden you start listening to him. It's like, oh, this is serious.
Yeah.
Not enough funding, but he's proven himself over and over again in his whole career, just genius level, and people are just catching up to him. So sense making itself is like what I invite people to do is just learn. If you don't know it and don't know some of the formal underpinnings, you should, and then keep adopting it, and that leads to other things. Like I don't say forecasting anymore. For instance, I say sidecasting. Thank you, Mr. Snowden. It's the probability likelihood of something happening tomorrow is already happening, and the probability of something not happening, like driverless cars being everywhere in the U.S., it's too far in the future to predict, so don't bother predicting it. It's a waste of time. Now, sidecasting is that you're going to go to Vegas and you're going to jump into a ride that's autonomous and you're going to have fun and scream or delight. That's sidecasting, and you're going to pay a big ticket for that. And the insurance will be coming from Disney or Paramount or wherever. Because that's what they do. Or they'll make a sign of release that we can sue them for anyway. There are ways around it in the sidecasting nature. So philosophically, we're here to find out ideas like this. This is the kind of group of people that actually get ideas put on the plate like this to serve, and you can continue with. And then these ideas, like the values, tested in front of hundreds of very smart people. And lots of debate, lots of open debate. Should this be in or out? John and I
Do
know
you
the
know the
power of
wisdom
writing
of
things
crowds?
down.
Do you know the book Wisdom of Crowds?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So that, I mean, it also resonates a little bit with me from this standpoint, right? You get a lot of smart people that actually talk about a topic, and you'd be surprised how well a Wisdom of Crowds does, right?
It goes well. It's about a pendulum thing. Sometimes an individual has to do something before the crowd can do something to follow it. But fascinating area. So we keep exploring these ideas philosophically. Sense making, right time, right place, right direction. Hopefully, it spreads out a little bit more than Steve and I are both aspirations in the insurance industry. Not a lot of sense making going there where it should. Sean, is there a point into that, or are we complete there?
No, I think that was pretty good. I mean, I think there's a sense making is kind of very much a what's going on, pretty much of the current and kind of how do we interpret the past. I think there's another facet or sect or a splinter cell, I guess, of group of people that we're trying to get all together in the same pool. I think if I did a 2x2 matrix, it would be sense making and critical thinking on one side, the current spectrum, both known and unknown, and futures thinking and foresight on the other one. So group of people that try to backcast and spot the signals. And I like your earlier point, Michael, about, yeah, we don't get to invent the future, right? Like we don't get to predict it.
We do get to call it.
Sorry, we get to invent it. We don't get to predict it. Short of casino, that's the reason why casinos make money, right? Nobody gets to predict the future. But
well, come on, back up a little bit. Like there is the question of moral imagination. What do we think we're going towards? What do we have in our sense of the future? And presently, 99% of the human race has a deranged sense of the future, a desperate sense of problems and possibility. Phoebe Tickle, one of the people who works with Nora Bateson and others, talks about the moral intelligence, the requirement that we keep a good intent. Because if we don't have a good intent, well, the skiers amongst us know, look where you're headed, because you're headed where you're looking. So let's be careful about what we're looking forward to. For me, the concept that I'd like to offer here is that of far-fetched. You've heard of many far-fetched theories. If we're going to make it into the future in any way, we have to do some serious far-fetching. So my intent is to imagine the future, not in a simplistic or complicated way, but the future as a complex interaction of sovereign beings in harmony with their space, their planet, the whole process, which our money does not provide. In fact,
which I think you're taking, in my terminology, you're creating that future, right? You're using your knowledge to help create that future and partake in it. So I agree with that. It's just that you can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean,
that's St. Paul, 1 Corinthians, faith, hope, and charity, right? You've got to have faith.
Yeah.
I.e., the thing that you're putting your trust in or your reliance or your intent has got to be rational, intelligent, put together. So faith, then hope. Because if you don't put your heart into it, then you're not even using your faith. So faith and hope, and then have charity, because God only knows what's going to happen and you've got to be prepared for it.
Yeah, I think my business partner out of Silicon Valley always says we have agency or domain over our future. So I think even though you do have a faith and there may be things that are fateful, I think that a lot of us in the guild would say, we have agency over the future. And I love Carl Schroeder's quote, foresight's not about predicting the future, it's about minimizing its surprise. And I think a lot of the things that you just mentioned, Michael, are about how do we think deeply so the future doesn't hit us like a cold shower.
Thank you. Yes.
Steve, what are you thinking? Steve, what are you thinking?
Well, there's a lot going on here, right? And so obviously I take this and I process it, and it's like, what's this mean to me? And I'm at a point where, in my life, my career, where I've got a couple kids, I got one in college, one will be in college next year. As far as, working to be a slave to the man, I'm let's not repeat this to my employer. I really like what I'm doing, but I'm done, right? I mean,
this is recorded.
Yeah, exactly. It's just going straight to Tel Aviv. I'm deep in my exit strategy, and what is it that you want to do that keeps you engaged and does something for the next generation. And I often loudly in my head saying, thank God I'm almost out of this rat race, because I would not want to be in the shoes of my kids, right? Trying to, just looking at what I see. So I'm listening intently, because I think on this, we think on different planes, and that's a good thing. Since high school or Ecole Secondaire, I've been described by my friends as somebody with an overdose of common sense. And because I may not be the smartest guy, but I always seem to know, like, hey, I'm going to get out of this car right now. And next thing you know, a half hour later, it crashes. I mean, I've just had a lot of experiences that way. So to me,
was it because it was an autonomous car, or was it?
Right.
Was there a driver?
It's just because I'm I just look at things like, I don't like the way this is going. I'm gonna move on, right? So you asked what I'm thinking. This is, it's fascinating, right? And it's something that you can wrap your head around 100 different ways. Obviously, being the pragmatist, I'm going, I don't want this to be a for-profit thing, because it shouldn't be. But what's the output? What can we do with it? Who can we advocate with? And that stuff, I'm sure I'll pick up over time. So there you go, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So on the thing, there's the big, we talked about big thoughts, and we've done a few big things across the year and a half or so. There's small things that a lot of people in the guild get involved with. They get involved in one event, they do one thing. One of the things that I want to do more of personally is just be with smart people and write more. And one of the things that has happened across the last years, that I always write about the business I'm in, but I don't write about other things, and I know I should. And this affords me an opportunity to do that. And then in a formal way, a repetitive way, enough that I'm engaged with other Sparks to keep doing those things. And the people around the guild, I enjoy doing it with. Like, I enjoy writing and creating things with people in different ways. And I get to do that, whether it's an hour in a given week, or sometimes my usual budget of time I spend with the guild, and I do a lot of stuff around, is about 10 hours a week. I consider it sort of hobby level. And I've got lots of different interests, and this is one of them. And I get to do some technical stuff underneath as well. So there's some of the underpinning that happens here. I get to kick around new tools, new ideas to create these ideas and collect this knowledge in certain places. So I get to do that too, in the sort of lab function. But that's the time that I spend on it. Some members of the guild only come to events. They're really observers. That's totally fine, because I find that when you present things, that's to have an audience gives you a motivation to be better and deliver things in a professional fashion and get feedback. Other people want to create some things and come along just for once in a while. They'll show up to do something, or they'll just do a bit of editing or a bit of feedback or a bit of construction, just ideation. So there are different ways to get involved. We've built out, and Sean's designed a lot of these events and publications and projects to let you dip in the way you want to.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, your summation is a pretty good one, right? Like, there's a lot of cool stuff here, and I think we've played it like a little bit of an orb in our hands in terms of what could we make out of this thing. I guarantee you the one thing though, you guys are got great smarts and pedigree of success behind all of you. The one thing you do leave the guild to a person is much smarter. You'll be smarter, wider, smarter, deeper on different things. I suffer from no shortage of intellectual arrogance, but constantly when I do things in the guild, I leave up thinking, wow, there's a book I didn't hear about. There's a concept that somebody just explained to me that's totally foundational, or there's a part of my world I didn't know too much about, like crypto this week. I'm an imposter when it comes to crypto. And so we were able to sneak into it. And I actually feel like, yeah, I've got probably a better rounded kind of thought about what it's all about. So anyway, we're probably on the soapbox right now, but appreciate what I'm hearing. Michael, I know you jumped in on my thing about predicting the future. Any questions that you have on your brain about the guild?
What comes of it is the interesting thing. I'm intrigued at the propagation component. We're in a world where memes have to move fast. If we're going to alter people's behavior, or have situations where people's behavior is dispositionally altered. I don't have any emphasis on getting inside their heads and changing their thinking, but you can move the diversion signs on the highway and people will follow the diversion signs. That's a level of transformation that we need, is small, incorruptible means that are easily transferred fast and have high impact. So we need a highly viral propagation of benign behavior. Just that.
Oh.
Just that. And if we look forward to that, we may see it.
I love those words. I'm writing them down again. Or can you repeat those on impulse 2 weeks from now when we're doing that? Oh, darn it.
No chance. Not a part.
Improv.
Yeah.
Check.
Yeah. C'est la vie. Hey.
The next one will be even better.
Yeah. It's don't forget, it started in Canada. That's a very important part of it. I mean, Canada, the games that come from Canada, who can forget basketball, for instance?
It's our sport, right? First game, Raptors are starting Raptors opener tonight, but
and then there's
I loved how Michael said it's sense making. It's such a nice Canadian term, like
America.
If you keep the hyphen, don't lose the hyphen.
We are going to take over America one day.
In all fairness, right? So my partner of 34 years is French Canadian. So born in Montreal, grew up in Sudbury, Ontario. So I've been all over Canada. I think I've been to every province except for Newfoundland and Saskatchewan. So I've even been to some of the Northern Territories. So I am partial Canadian, if you will. So anyway.
So one of the things we really don't focus on the Canadian thing. I think part of my reasoning about talking about Canada is I was just in the U.S. for the last 6 weeks, and I always am a little more Canadian when I come out of it, being back in the U.S. And I've worked 98% of my career in the last 20 years have been in U.S. organizations, U.S. brands. So I'm so used to doing it that I lost my A.
Hey.
I blame the Americans for that. But I know that I'm always a little more Canadian when I come back across the border.
Yeah. Sean has a little bit more of a Canadian accent than you do, Rob. So.
It's funny, you know what it is? Rob comes back from the US and he is very declarative. The end of his sentences are always yes, and we will go into battle. Meanwhile, I'm like, so is everybody along for the ride? Right? Okay, good.
Yeah, and you've got that spike out the back of your head there, Sean, that really gives you location. We know where you are.
I'm always at about 6:30 at night in Toronto, right? So
yeah.
Well, this was great, guys. I mean, I don't want to. I mean, we could go forever with you guys. We probably could. We could probably take advantage of that. I will send you the deck that we were going to go through just for posterity's sake. There's some good graphics in there for no other reason, but I think it may explain things a little thoroughly. There's a couple things. I mean, the 1, 2, 3 step, if there is any, is we have a couple clubhouses. I mean, Friday at 1 o'clock, we're talking about more of the how-tos on sense making. So if you're around on Clubhouse, I know some people say it's a dying medium or whatever, but we found an interesting one out of the gate to actually connect with people. And then on Sunday, Rob leads our band of merrymen talking about Sunday 11 o'clock Eastern time. We talk about this week's news wrap theme is loss, right? Or at least your sense of loss. And then I'd say one really big thing, and we might want to consider this too, Rob, is just if you guys are game, like there's 20 different topics that we want to talk about and look at a 3-year perspective on. I'm sure at least 1 or 2 of those topics hit all of you guys in the solar plexus. So maybe if you guys are game, maybe we're still looking for panelists. So if you feel comfortable, maybe we'll kind of.
I mean, I would be interested. I did notice. I mean, I sat in on there was an earlier atelier that I sat in on earlier and participated in. And I know that there was a comment that you made about that as well. And so I spoke with actually the Canadian lady from Vancouver that was on the panel as well. And she actually mentioned it to me as well because of a story that I told her. And so she said, you should talk to these guys and see how you can get involved. So anyway, I am interested maybe. So
wonderful. Is that Lorena?
Yeah, that's right.
Smart woman. Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, we'll send it to, I'll send kind of the form as well, so you can look at times and like where the open spots are. And, Michael L, if you will, there's a financial one. There's probably 2 or 3 ones that hit you. Michael H. There's like, healthcare and tech and whatever. And Steve, insurance covers a lot of things. You should be on a panel with another friend of Rob, Barry Radkin. Do you know Barry?
Of course.
Oh yeah.
I like Barry.
See, you come across as less angry man chasing kids off the front lawn like Barry does, but both
Hey,
of
you kids, get out of that Tesla.
I'm a tech optimist. I'm like, within 10 or 15 years, forget about the insurance thing. There's going to be enough will here that autonomous vehicles will be a mainstream thing. And Barry's like, you're crazy. You're crazy youngins. Get off my front lawn, kid. So, yeah.
Well,
I'm going to write a review. He's got a book coming out in March. I'm going to write a review of it.
And you mentioned, I know people don't think about it because it's a uniquely, stupidly American thing, but you also talk about healthcare. I mean, one of my jobs at a previous employer was looking at the different health deliveries around the system. And then we were in charge of creating the first healthcare.gov. And that drove me near insane to see how inefficient, and also somebody who, again, grew up for a while in Canada and was on whatever they call it in Quebec, not OHIP, but I forget the French thing. And then the lunacy that we're doing here. My God. So yeah, I mean, again, the tentacles of insurance go very wide, right? Because people look at insurance and like, stupid, but it becomes the enabler of an awful lot of things that very few people can describe it. And us Americans, the way that it's regulated, it becomes sometimes a paralyzing factor in our society because it's regulated by the lowest level politicians in our country. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but when you look at guys like me and Rob and say, oh, they know a lot about insurance, my gosh, the tentacles go really a long way.
Yeah, and the insurance in the U.S. is, whether it's healthcare or whether it's just for your car in Florida or in California, I mean, the U.S. is such a unique fiasco of insurance, if you will, that's not modeled gladly and happily almost anywhere else in the world. So
the only caveat I'll say to this entire discussion, because I think we've objectively tumbled through that discussion. We are, it's probably not the most stated value. I think it's like a guardrail of ours, but we do call ourselves either non-political or apolitical, like we don't have a political point of view.
Every time Sean says that, I challenge it, right? Because we start saying things like, healthcare should. Okay, so if we're apolitical.
No, I know, but I think that conversation is well and good across the guild. But remember, we had a guy that just had a hate on for Trump, and his entire essay was based on hating Trump, as opposed to what's the issue that you have that you want to tumble about, right?
And it really, it's not the politics; it's the result on society, right? I mean, healthcare in the United States should not be a political issue, right? It shouldn't be, but it's become so you can't put on your blinders and deny it. You don't have to take a political stance. You just have to take a stance on what should be done. And if that becomes political,
and I agree with that.
That's not us.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's a good way to put it because, from my standpoint, anything that we work on that's going to be impactful for the future will have a political impact. And so to say that we're not political, I think we would not say that we are politically associated with particular perspectives of politics. But I think that everything that we do should be, in a way, impacting the future, which would impact politics, right?
Yeah, it's more the starting point. And Michael, I know you were about to jump in, Michael L. I think it's more the starting point, right? Like, I think if somebody had a well-reasoned argument that was left of center or right of center, we should be equally feeling like that's a plausible point of view if it's supported, right? But that's where editorial review and other things come into play. Michael L.
Yeah, I just thought a curveball in here that's pretty current in Canada. Reconciliation. Truth and reconciliation. Indigenous lifestyles, the land property ownership model imported by the colonialists, the methods of perhaps unsettling society somewhat. Where does the white, the gray, the black swan fly in this area?
Yeah, no, we encountered it even in the Day of the Swan, where it's just like, do we have a greeting for people like, the lands of, and unfortunately, when you do a global guild thing, I guess we weren't fluent at the time in terms of what we were to do on that. It's and I think it goes beyond Canada. I think one of these monthly ateliers should focus on strictly as a global. It would be really interesting, Michael, doing a global Indigenous atelier where it's just like you bring a Maori from New Zealand. I could go through all of them, but that would be scintillatingly interesting to see what their shared experience is like.
Oh yeah, I think it's fundamental humanity. We know that I believe that no leader in any of the countries of the world has any moral authority if there's not fair treatment of all citizens and all treaties that were tried to form and not been formed or unformed. It's a blight on many post-colonial nations, and they've got to figure it out. And we got to figure it out. I don't know the answers on this. I know that that it is certainly in Canada, Australia, U.S., all of Europe, all of Africa, world top issue. It's right there with climate change. It's that big a human issue.
There is a tendency, however, to see it as we have colonized the Indigenous community. The question I'm looking at is, do we realize how we have been colonized ourselves?
I guess on some level, somebody's always colonizing somebody else, aren't they?
Well, Michael Hudson writes about the banking and financial institutions, including obviously the insurance world, as basically a parasitic process that has convinced the host that it is the host.
It's not lost on me the Banking Act in Canada is from 1867, which is when Canada was formed. There's no difference between Canada and the Banking Act. They're frickin' frack. They were designed together. And much to the admiration of many other nations to have only 5 banks in charge of a 30 million person population. And more banks in Switzerland,
the
right?
States, they've only got one in the States. It's called the Federal Reserve. And it's not even public. It's a private property. So you've got a problem
by other banks.
So like I'm just saying we have been colonized by a process which is basically international corporatism and conventional economic nationalism.
Yeah.
And all of us are deprived by the situation. We are all deprived by colonialization, and we've got to get out of that shit and get on with a life that works. So that's why I threw the question in. I just find it a good touchstone for.
It is. So this is the type of thing where we go on this kind of style of thinking, Michael. It starts as a germinated idea. Right now, our weekly mechanism is the rap. We build these themes for a rap. I sense that we could build a theme around this rap, think about it for a week or 2 weeks, then build an event around that has a follow-on real-time publication that can occur, that we can share broader and see where it goes.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I don't know the answers, right? I am totally comfortable that I have no idea what's next in this.
I think it is obviously the liminal experience is moving through a place you don't know about to discover on the other side. So if you think you know where you're going, you're probably self-deceived at that level. So what we're looking for is rapid iterations of high information, high value content, which can feed back into the reiteration of the process, standard. So we're looking for interactive game processes with scenario development around economic challenges in communities of any scale, size, relationship. That's our gig in the open money thing at the moment.
Michael, do you not expect, we know that Steve's perspective of the autonomous vehicle is, likely not going to happen soon, at least in the US. The whole Star Trek utopian world of where you don't actually have money.
Is crap. It's a pure dreamland of William Shatner.
I kind of guessed that, but I didn't want to assume. I never want to assume in critical thinking. So.
Yeah. From the mouth of William Shatner, indeed. Yes. Gosh. All right.
You answered it.
Yeah, when you hear that if the US actually coined $1 trillion piece of platinum, it would solve their debt bill. When you hear insanities of that level being propagated as a resolution of the insanity that is the United States of America.
I heard that interview this past week, and he sounded so sane. He sounded so dangerous. People like that.
Yeah.
It's platinum. There's enough of it.
Too much Dungeons and Dragons as a young man, I think, but we can only surmise. Yeah, I think technological presumption, Michael, is going to drag us where we think it is. My point is we've been dragged. We talk about social media corrupting society. Well, what is money but the social medium? And the one we've used is a competitive, destructive, extractive, impersonal, irresponsible system. I think it sucks. So I'd rather do something else. And we see this as a rather Canadian invention, is a game development collective around these scenarios. And we invite you to be interested in that, because that's all we do at this point.
I like Michael chiming in on things. You remind me of another Canadian, Mike Myers from So I Married an Axe Murderer, where it's like, if it ain't Scottish, it's crap. I love it. We've overstayed our welcome, maybe, or at least I've overstayed mine. I've got a 5:30 coming up here, but I'm going to put at least my primary email on the box here. Any question whatsoever, I'm sure myself or Rob will totally open ourselves up. We've put the member form in, which I guess if you go through it, gets you on the official kind of behind the velvet rope if we have one. And I've also put a link in there on our next atelier it runs across 2 days, but it's the first day one. So
it runs
forever. Did you fat finger
Rob.
that email, Sean, or is it Brams or Brands?
Brands. Wow, I really munched that, didn't I?
It's only the book that you wrote. That's all. Wiki Brands. Yes,
Brands.
there's a fat finger there.
I could do hello at future proofing next, or
it really means he doesn't want any email from you. That's his spam bucket email.
Great. It's great. I used to be part of a great children's music act in Canada, Sharon, Lois, and Bram, right?
That was you, yeah. BS kind of.
Different people.
Yeah.
And then do we have, Rob, you'll either send the deck out.
Them. I've got Steve's contact info, but not Michael's or Michael.
Oh.
Did they not have to submit their info for this?
Yeah, well, we got the deep check from the Israelis I used to work with. Has already been occurred, and you guys cleared that.
Nice.
So I spent 5 years with Bolt, Steve. Bolt Solutions.
Yeah, and what was the precursor to Bolt? It's driving me crazy.
CPAS.
CPAS.
So they're doing. So the one of the things because I'm so insurance, I don't do a lot of insurance in the guild because I do it on the outside of the guild. However, Steve, no big surprise. You're both Michaels. You can't really talk about society without talking about some form of risk management. Some form of risk management is either currency or insurance. You pick.
Although, strangely enough, every time we end one of our ateliers, Rob has the temerity to say, "Have you thought about your family that much?" And then puts into his insurance pitch. So yeah.
Well, my insurance.
I should get my license. That'd be dangerous.
My insurance.
Yeah.
Sorry, but my insurance thing is this a Titanic problem or a Hindenburg?
Ooh, I like that.
You got to look at the downstream consequences, because the Titanic changed nothing. And the Hindenburg blew it all apart.
I love that line. Wow. I heard a Stephen Wright line earlier today. It's like, I'm having premonitions of my flashbacks.
That's Stephen Wright.
That was pretty good.
That's good.
Yeah.
He could be Canadian.
Vu déjà.
Deja vu, vu déjà. Yeah. I gotta run, guys.
All over again.
Yeah, you lot, all over again. Vu déjà.
My hope is the first of many discussions, gentlemen. There may be other people interloping on our discussions in the future. Hopefully you'll tolerate them. You'll at least tolerate them, right? So
be very
really good
Canadian.
seeing you, Steve, Michael, Rob.
Pleasure.
That
was
Thanks,
delicious.
guys. Looking forward to it. Thanks,
everybody.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys. Take care. Bye now. How was that, Sean?
That was pretty good. Great guys, eh?
I think so, eh?
You got it back. Do you want to send the deck out, or should I?
Well, I'm. Oh, I can do it. No problem. This interesting experiment on LinkedIn Live, it's seamless.
What'd you do on LinkedIn Live?
I turned it on, and there's a.
Oh, are
It
we on live right now?
went live. Yeah.
Jesus. Is anybody going to have a career limiting move?
There was only one comment, but it slightly lagged, right? So it's there. I'm just trying to turn it
Oh
off.
man, I didn't see I saw it. It was in the vagary